What if I told you that every time you overthink a text, replay a conversation, or wonder what they're doing now, you're handing over your power like a gift they didn't even have to ask for? What if all that anxiety, that emotional weight you carry, that urge to reach out, what if that's exactly what they want? Not because they care about you, not because they love you, but because it keeps them in control. This isn't just about heartbreak. It's about power, self-worth, and the psychological games that most people don't even realize they're trapped in. Let's face it, most people were never taught how to navigate emotional detachment. We've been told that love means chasing, explaining, proving. We've been taught that silence means weakness, that if we don't react, we don't care. But that's a lie, a dangerous one. Because the more you chase, the more you lose. And the more you try to prove your value to someone who already left, the more invisible you become. This is the trap. And if you're caught in it right now, I want you to know there's a way out. The truth is, you don't need them to validate your worth. You don't need their closure to move on. And you definitely don't need to keep giving them the satisfaction of knowing they still have space in your mind. This isn't about becoming cold. This isn't about pretending. It's about embracing the mindset of stoicism, one where you no longer allow your peace to be dictated by someone else's presence or absence. One where stoic relationships are built not on attachment, but on freedom and self-respect. So what if you stopped giving them everything they expect? What if you became unmoved, unshaken, unfazed? What if, instead of showing them your pain, you showed them your silence? In this video, you're going to discover how that one decision changes everything. I'm going to walk you through 6 powerful shifts, rooted in both modern psychology and ancient wisdom, that will not only help you reclaim your power, but make them question everything. And trust me, the final part will leave you thinking in a way you've never considered before. So if you're tired of feeling powerless, if you're done being someone else's emotional fuel, stay locked in, because what comes next is the mindset reset you didn't know you needed, but won't be able to live without. Let's begin. 1. The trap of emotional reactivity. Why do you feel that knot in your chest when they don't respond? Why do you check your phone 10 times an hour, hoping for a message that never comes? Why do you still think about what you could have done differently, as if rewriting the past in your mind will somehow change what's already been done? These aren't just random reactions, they're signs you've been pulled into something deeper, a psychological trap, one designed to make you predictable, one that feeds on your pain. And worst of all, one that you might not even realize you've stepped into. We live in a world where emotions are currency. When you show pain, they gain power. When you hesitate to send a message, they sense it. When you overthink your every move, they already know they have you. It's not about love, it's about control. And the truth is, the person you are obsessing over might not even need to lift a finger anymore. You've become your own jailer, replaying every word, every look, every unanswered message, like it holds the key to your freedom. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you react emotionally, every time you spiral into what-ifs, and maybe they'll come back, you're giving them exactly what they want: your attention, your time, your energy. And that, my friend, is power. Let me ask you, who's really in control when you wake up and the first thing you do is check their social media? When your mood for the day depends on whether they watched your story or ignored your text. You know the answer. They are. Even if they're not around anymore, even if they've walked away, they still live in your mind, rent-free. That's the trap. And the hardest part, you set it up yourself by placing your happiness in their hands. Attachment creates a kind of blindness. You stop seeing reality as it is. You start creating stories, justifications, fantasies about how it could still work out. You excuse their behavior. You replay every detail, trying to make sense of the pain. But Stoicism teaches us something. Radically different, that the pain doesn't come from what they did, it comes from how we respond. You are not suffering because they left. You are suffering because you continue to cling, you continue to react, and reaction is a symptom of emotional dependence. Let's be honest. How many times have you felt compelled to text them just to feel some kind of connection, even a negative one? How often have you sat in silence, hoping they'd notice your absence, only to break it yourself with a message that screams, "I still care"? You justify it with words like closure, clarity, one last talk. But deep down, you're chasing validation. You're seeking proof that you still matter to them. But here's the kicker. The more you need that proof, the more they know they don't have to give it to you. Because in your mind, they're already everything. And in theirs, you've become nothing but a predictable reaction. This is where most men fail. They think being vulnerable will spark some kind of realization in the other person. They think that by proving their love, their heartbreak, their loyalty, they'll win her back. But that's not how the dynamic works. When you show that she still has emotional power over you, especially after she's walked away, it doesn't draw her in. It pushes her further away. You become less valuable, not more. Because in Stoic relationships, strength is not in how much you feel. It's in how little you're moved by those who try to control your feelings. That doesn't mean you shut down emotionally. It means you stop bleeding for someone who doesn't even bother to notice the wound. It means you stop reacting to tests you never agreed to take. And make no mistake, many of the behaviors you think are signs of confusion or mixed signals are not that at all. They're calculated tests. She wants to see if you'll break, if you'll beg, if you'll lose your sense of self the moment she pulls away. And if you do, you fail, not just in her eyes, but in your own. Because once you compromise your integrity, once you abandon your sense of worth for even a moment of emotional validation, you lose far more than the relationship. You lose your center. Now ask yourself, what happens if you stop reacting? What happens if, instead of chasing closure, you give silence? What happens if, instead of checking her profile, you check yourself, your habits, your values, your direction? Everything changes, because the second you stop giving emotional fuel, the dynamic flips. You are no longer the source of her power. You become the one who defines the terms of your emotional life. That's what Stoicism demands, that you hold your ground, that you remain calm when others expect chaos, that you walk away without looking back, not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more. Some of you are probably thinking, but won't she think I don't care? Maybe, but what matters more, what she thinks or what you know to be true? This is the ultimate test of discipline. Can you sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood in order to preserve your inner peace? Can you resist the urge to correct her assumptions, to explain yourself, to prove your side of the story? Because that urge, while it may feel justified, is still reaction, and reaction keeps you in the trap. In Stoic relationships, the goal isn't to win someone back. The goal is to never lose yourself again. And when you stop reacting, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you forgot existed. The part that doesn't chase, the part that doesn't need closure, the part that knows you were whole long before she walked into your life. This isn't about pretending you're okay. This is about becoming okay, genuinely, deeply, unshakably. So, here's the truth. You're giving them exactly what they want every time you respond emotionally. And until you stop, nothing will change. You'll stay stuck in the loop, hoping, waiting, overanalyzing. But once you see the trap, you can step out of it. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with clarity, with strength, with stillness. Because you finally understand. Your peace is not something anyone can take. It's something you surrender, and from this moment on, you refuse to give it away. 2. The power of indifference. Why does indifference cut deeper than anger? Why is silence more unsettling than confrontation? Because silence is uncharted territory. It's the one response they can't predict, the one emotion they can't manipulate. When someone expects drama and gets distance instead, they don't know what to do with that. It disrupts their narrative. It forces them to confront something uncomfortable, the idea that they no longer matter in your world. You might be asking yourself, how can I be indifferent when I still care? That's a valid question. But here's the truth. Indifference doesn't mean you never cared. It means you've made a conscious decision not to let that care turn into chaos. It's a boundary, not a betrayal. It's a statement that your peace is no longer negotiable. You can care and still choose distance. You can feel pain and still choose silence. And in that space between emotion and reaction lies the essence of Stoicism. In a society that rewards overexpression, indifference feels radical. But in Stoic relationships, it's essential, because emotions, when left unchecked, make you easy to read and easier to control. The moment you explode, they know they've got you. The moment you argue, plead, defend, or explain, you've already lost your center. But when you respond with absolute stillness, when you show no sign of instability or urgency, that's when they start to question everything. Have you ever noticed how someone starts to lean in when you pull away? That's not coincidence. It's human psychology. We chase what's distant. We crave what's uncertain. Certainty, while comforting, kills intrigue. And you were once the source of that intrigue, until you made them the center of your emotional universe. That's when they pulled away. Not because you weren't enough, but because you gave too much. You gave away the mystery. You gave away the tension. And in doing so, you gave away your value. Indifference restores that value. It says, I am no longer emotionally available to someone who treats me like an option. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and that whisper echoes louder than any shouted argument. Because now they have to guess. Now they have to wonder. Why didn't he react? Why isn't he calling? Why isn't he trying to fix this? That confusion creates tension, and tension breeds curiosity. And curiosity can spark regret. Regret that maybe they misjudged you. Regret that maybe they mistook your silence for strength instead of weakness. But let's get one thing straight. This is not about playing games. This is not about faking indifference to get a reaction. That's manipulation, and manipulation is still a form of emotional dependence. What we're talking about is real, authentic detachment, a mindset rooted in Stoicism, where your self-worth isn't tied to their approval and your emotions don't need their validation. This is the kind of indifference that doesn't come from spite. It comes from understanding. You understand that someone who wanted to stay would have stayed. You understand that your value isn't measured by how long you wait, but by how well you move on. And most importantly, you understand that your emotional energy is sacred. It shouldn't be wasted on people who only show up when they need a confidence boost. This is what makes indifference so powerful. It reclaims your energy. It puts you back in control. Now let's be honest, indifference isn't easy, especially when you're still hurting, especially when the memories still linger. But here's the thing, indifference doesn't start with how you feel. It starts with how you act. And over time, that behavior shapes your reality. You don't wait to feel indifferent to stop texting. You stop texting, and indifference grows. You don't wait to feel detached to stop checking their profile. You stop checking, and detachment follows. It's the act of not reacting that begins to rewire your brain. You train your mind to stop associating them with reward. And eventually, you realize they hold no real power, only the power you gave them. In Stoic relationships, this shift is everything. It means no more chasing, no more justifying, no more hoping they'll change or come back with some grand apology. You remove them, not with hate, but with peace. You no longer try to rewrite the story. You simply stop reading it. And that quiet withdrawal, that's what changes everything. Because you're not just withdrawing from them, you're withdrawing from the need to be seen, validated, or desired by someone who couldn't see your worth the first time. Have you ever sat in silence and realized how much of your identity was wrapped up in proving your value to someone else? How often have you caught yourself crafting the perfect message, not because you wanted to express something, but because you wanted to provoke a response? That's not communication, that's emotional bargaining. And every time you do it, you reinforce the dynamic where they are the prize and you are the pursuer. Indifference flips that dynamic. You stop being the one reaching out. You become the one who is reached for. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. You align your actions with the truth of your worth. And once you do, people can feel it, even from a distance, even in silence. There's a certain calm that comes with no longer being emotionally entangled, and it's in that calm that your true power begins to emerge. You move with intention. You choose your responses. You don't explain your silence. You embody it. And suddenly, the same person who once dismissed you starts to pay attention, not because you tried to make them, but because you stopped trying altogether. You'll notice it in subtle ways. The random message, the vague, "Hey, how have you been?" The sudden interest in your life. Make no mistake, this is not coincidence. This is confusion. They want to know why you're so calm, why you seem unaffected, why you're no longer orbiting around them. And in that curiosity, a new emotion arises: doubt. Doubt is powerful. It plants the seed of regret. It forces them to reflect, to revisit, to reframe the story they told themselves when they walked away. They thought you'd fall apart. Instead, you flourished. But here's where many people stumble. When the other person returns, even slightly, they break the silence too soon. They take it as a sign. They mistake attention for change. But indifference means holding the line, not to punish, but to protect. You don't allow someone back in just because they miss your energy. You assess whether they've earned access to it. That's the standard. That's the discipline. Because now, you are not the man who needs her back. You are the man she no longer understands. In this space, your life begins to expand. Your focus sharpens. Your goals realign. You realize how much time you wasted in emotional chaos. And you promise yourself you'll never go back. Not because you hate her, but because you love yourself more. That is the power of indifference. Not coldness, not bitterness, but peace. Peace that cannot be disturbed by someone else's decisions. Peace that does not flinch in the face of silence. Peace that is built on the foundation of self-respect. So, I'll leave you with this. If your silence is making them curious, don't break it. If your indifference is making them rethink, don't explain it. You've already said everything you needed to say by walking away. Now let your absence speak volumes, and let their confusion remind them of what they once had and lost. If this resonates with you, like the video and comment number 1 below. Let me know you're choosing your power today. And if you want to keep walking this path with clarity, confidence, and purpose, subscribe now. There's more coming that will elevate your mindset and keep you untouchable. 3. The comeback. Rebuilding in silence. They expected you to fall apart. They expected your world to pause, your ambition to crumble, your energy to collapse into waiting. Waiting for a message, waiting for closure, waiting for something to reverse the emptiness. That's what they counted on, that you would sit in that pain and do nothing with it but replay the past. But what they didn't expect was the silence. Not the kind that signals defeat, but the kind that signals transformation. That's when the story changes. Most people think a comeback is loud. They think it needs to be seen, announced, shared. But that's not how real comebacks work. Real comebacks happen in shadows. They happen in the quiet hours, in the absence of attention. They're built in the gym when no one's watching, in the books you read when everyone else is distracted, in the nights you stay focused instead of falling back into emotional loops. The world doesn't clap for your discipline. It doesn't applaud your boundaries, but that's what makes the transformation real, because you're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it for you. After a breakup, there's a window, a dangerous one, where you feel like you have something to prove. You want to show them they were wrong. You want to post the right photo, say the right thing, make them regret ever walking away. But here's the truth. If your comeback is still about them, you haven't really let go. You're just reacting with better packaging, and Stoicism reminds us of this brutal truth. As long as they have influence over your actions, you're still bound. That's why rebuilding in silence is so powerful. It forces you to look inward, to stop performing, to stop chasing the illusion of revenge, and instead focus on true mastery. Think about it. What's more powerful? Telling them you're fine, or showing them nothing at all because your mind is too focused on progress to care who's watching? That's the shift. That's where the power moves from proving to becoming. You stop checking for them. You stop wondering what they think. You stop shaping your identity around whether they see you or not. Because suddenly, your purpose is bigger than them. Your life expands. Your vision sharpens. You wake up and your first thought isn't what they're doing. It's what you're building. This is where most people break. They confuse temporary comfort for healing. They chase validation instead of peace. They think success is measured by how jealous you can make someone feel. But let me ask you this. When was the last time someone else's attention created lasting fulfillment? When was the last time proving yourself to another person actually healed the wound? It never has. It never will, because healing doesn't come from reaction. It comes from intention. And intention can only be cultivated in silence. When you rebuild quietly, you become unpredictable. No updates, no explanations, no breadcrumbs for them to follow. You simply vanish into your own development. And that absence, that's what triggers curiosity. That's what starts the doubt in their mind. At first, they won't notice. They'll assume you're still orbiting. But as time passes and nothing comes, not a like, not a message, not a whisper, they'll feel the shift. They'll realize you're no longer where they left you. You've moved forward. And that forward motion makes you untouchable. But here's what's even more important than how they perceive you, how you begin to perceive yourself. At first, silence feels like emptiness, but soon it becomes focus, then strength, then identity. You begin to remember what it felt like to move for your own sake, to evolve without performance, to grow without needing a witness. That's when you understand the essence of Stoic relationships. They don't exist to complete you. They exist to reflect who you already are. And once that reflection becomes distorted by manipulation, by emotional games, by a loss of self, then the relationship has already lost its soul. Now, as you rebuild, the process is slow. There's no overnight epiphany, just habits, just daily, deliberate actions. You start with your body. The gym becomes a ritual, not to impress, but to reclaim discipline. You push through the resistance. You rebuild strength. You rebuild posture. And without even realizing it, your confidence starts to shift. Your eyes change. Your energy shifts. You carry yourself differently, not because you're performing, but because you're aligned. Then, your mind follows. You stop feeding it junk. No more scrolling through their profile, no more replaying conversations. You replace consumption with creation. You read, you write, you study, you build skills, not to escape the pain, but to outgrow it. You realize you were never supposed to wait in the ashes. You were meant to rise from them. And every time you invest in your growth, you send a message, not to them, but to yourself. I am worth rebuilding. Financially, you realign. You stop wasting money on distractions. You focus on stacking skills, building assets, creating leverage. Because the more stable your life becomes, the less dependent you are on emotional highs. You don't need someone to come back. You need your goals to move forward. This is the foundation of Stoic power. It's not about detachment from people. It's about deep attachment to purpose. And maybe the most beautiful part, one day you'll look back and realize they no longer matter, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because they've become irrelevant to your story. You'll remember who you were before you met them, and you'll see how far you've come since. You won't hate them, you won't even think of them, because your life will have expanded so far beyond that chapter that revisiting it feels like flipping through an old journal, useful but no longer part of the present. But make no mistake, when you do this right, they will feel it. Not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly. They'll hear things, they'll notice changes, they'll feel the absence, and that absence will start to echo. The person they left behind doesn't exist anymore. And that terrifies them. Because now they no longer have access to your energy, and people don't regret what they lost. They regret what they can no longer reach. So rebuild, not for revenge, not for attention, but because it's the only path forward. Stoicism doesn't promise that the pain will vanish. It promises that you will grow strong enough to carry it without letting it define you. That you will become more than what you've lost. That your identity will not be forged by pain, but by the discipline to turn that pain into progress. When you do this, you become untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing owns you. Not their silence, not their opinion, not their absence. You own your path. You control your energy. You move forward with a quiet strength that demands no recognition. And when the world finally sees what you've become, it won't be because you showed them. It'll be because they had no choice but to notice. For the reverse effect, attraction through scarcity. You were told that if you love someone, you should show it. That if you want to keep them, you should be transparent, generous, emotionally available. And for a while, that might have felt right. You gave, you showed up. You proved your loyalty, your affection, your depth. But what happened? Did it bring them closer, or did it push them further away? The uncomfortable truth is that the more you gave, the less they valued it. Not because love is wrong, but because human nature is built on contrast, not consistency. And the more available you made yourself, the less they had to wonder. The mystery died. The tension faded. You became predictable. It's time to face a hard reality. People don't chase what they believe they already have. They don't appreciate what they assume will always be there. This isn't cynicism. This is psychology. The law of scarcity governs far more than supply and demand. It governs attraction, desire, and perception. When something is always available, it loses its edge. But when something becomes rare, it becomes powerful. That's the reverse effect. And it's one of the most overlooked principles in Stoic relationships. So let me ask you, are you really losing her? Or are you simply giving her too much? Too much access, too much certainty, too much emotional energy with nothing in return? Think about it. Every time you text first, every time you validate her importance, every time you make yourself easily reachable, you're reinforcing a dynamic. You are chasing, and she is retreating. Not necessarily because she's cruel, but because she's human. We all crave challenge. We all want to feel like we've earned someone's attention. And when that attention is handed over without condition, it feels cheap. But here's where the magic happens. The moment you pull back, everything starts to shift. Not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly. The silence creates space. That space creates curiosity. That curiosity creates doubt. And doubt is what sparks reflection. Because now she's no longer receiving your attention on demand. Now she starts to wonder, why isn't he texting me? Why does he seem so calm? Why does it feel like I'm the one thinking about him now? That's the reverse effect in action. You've flipped the script, not by playing games, but by changing your energy. You've gone from being the one who seeks to the one who attracts. And this isn't about manipulation. This is about balance. You're no longer flooding the connection with your presence. You're giving it space to breathe, to be missed, to be reconsidered. And in that pause, you become more valuable, not because you've changed, but because your availability has. This is the foundation of attraction, scarcity, rarity, mystery. These elements are not optional. They are essential. They create emotional gravity. And when someone starts to feel that pull again, they begin to revisit the past with new eyes. Suddenly the things she overlooked before, the way you listened, the way you carried yourself, the way you protected your peace, begin to stand out. Because now, they're no longer accessible. They're no longer guaranteed. They're gone. And what's gone becomes golden in memory. But remember, this only works when it's real. If your distance is a tactic, she'll feel it. If you're pulling back just to provoke a response, it reeks of desperation. But if your distance is authentic, if it comes from a place of true detachment and focus on your own growth, it creates a shift that she can't ignore. It forces her to confront something unexpected. You are no longer the man who needs her, and that changes everything. Now she starts watching you, not because she wants to get back together, not yet, but because she needs to understand. She needs to know why you didn't react like everyone else, why you didn't chase, why you didn't crumble, and that silent strength, that absence of need, it rattles her. Because she expected emotion, she expected vulnerability, she expected weakness. And when she doesn't see it, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time. Doubt. Did she underestimate you? Did she misjudge the situation? Did she walk away from a man who was actually stronger than she realized? This is why Stoicism is so powerful in relationships. Because it gives you the ability to hold your ground, to regulate your emotions, to maintain your value without needing to explain a word. You're not chasing, you're not convincing, you're not proving. You're simply living in alignment with your own standard, and that standard is what creates magnetism. People are drawn to those who don't flinch under pressure, who don't beg for attention, who remain unmoved by external validation. That's rare, and what's rare is always desired. As the reverse effect unfolds, don't expect fireworks, expect tension, expect confusion, expect subtle shifts, a message out of nowhere, a like on an old photo, a just checking in that's anything but casual. These aren't coincidences. These are tests. She wants to see if the old version of you still exists, the one who would jump at the first sign of interest, the one who needed her acknowledgement to feel whole. But that man is gone. He was replaced by someone who understands the power of emotional discipline, someone who knows that attention given too easily is always taken for granted, and maybe she does come back. Maybe the scarcity awakens a new level of interest. But here's the real test. Are you strong enough to remain detached? Are you clear enough to assess her motives instead of reacting emotionally? Can you look at her presence with the same calm you had during her absence? Because the moment you get emotionally pulled back in, the dynamic resets. She regains control. You go back to chasing, and everything you built quietly begins to dissolve. That's why the reverse effect is not just about space, it's about transformation. You're not just creating scarcity, you're becoming someone rare. Someone so focused, so grounded, so self-assured that people can feel your energy shift even if they can't explain it. That's what leaves an impression. Not your words, not your gestures, your state. And once you lock into that state, the world around you adjusts. People notice, not because you asked them to, but because your silence became undeniable. This is the core of Stoic relationships, emotional sovereignty. You are no longer a man swayed by attention, by rejection, by validation. You walk your path regardless of who joins you. And that path becomes magnetic. The more you walk it, the more people realize they don't just want your presence, they need to earn it. And when she sees that she's no longer the exception, that she no longer has guaranteed access to your energy, she begins to feel what you once felt: uncertainty, discomfort, longing. And that, my friend, is when the reverse effect becomes complete. So let her wonder. Let her guess. Let her feel the silence you once begged to break. Because your silence is no longer about waiting. It's about building. It's about becoming. And if she truly sees your worth, she'll come back with different energy. If not, you've already moved far enough ahead that her return won't matter. If this message hit home, like this video, and comment number 1 below. Let me know you're done chasing and ready to attract. And if you're walking this path of empower, clarity, and true emotional mastery, subscribe now. There's more coming to keep your mindset locked in and your energy unshakable. 5. The silent power move. There's something haunting about silence. Not the kind that comes from a lack of words, but the kind that speaks volumes without saying a thing. You see, most people expect a reaction. When they walk away, when they push you, when they test you, they expect sound, noise, feedback, emotion. But when you give them nothing, that's when the game changes. That's when you stop being part of their plan and start becoming part of their confusion. You're not supposed to be still. You're not supposed to be composed. You're supposed to spiral, to react, to break down. That's what they were counting on when they left. That you would post something vague and emotional, that you'd reach out one last time, that you'd beg for closure or some kind of clarity, because that keeps you predictable. That keeps you on the emotional hook. But when you simply disappear, when you remove your energy, your presence, your reaction, you create a void they can't ignore. This is the silent power move. It's not revenge, it's not manipulation, it's discipline. And in Stoic relationships, discipline is everything. You don't control how others act, you control how you respond, and your silence is the most potent response you can offer. Because it doesn't just end the conversation, it rewrites the entire narrative. Let me ask you something. How many times have you been tempted to send that last message? Just a quick, "I hope you're okay," or "I just wanted you to know how I feel." As if those words would fix what broke, as if expressing your pain will suddenly make them realize your value. But it never works. You end up more exposed, more vulnerable, more disappointed, and they walk away with confirmation that you're still there, still waiting, still caught in their gravity. That's why the silent power move is so terrifying to them, because it removes that confirmation, it removes that certainty, it leaves them with questions they can't answer. When you walk away without a word, you break the script. Most people aren't prepared for that. They're prepared for anger. They're prepared for desperation. They're prepared for noise. But silence is unfamiliar. It forces introspection. It forces them to wonder. And that wondering is what breaks their emotional frame, because they can no longer define you by your reactions. They can no longer use your emotions to validate their decisions. You have to understand this. When someone pulls away, they often do so believing they'll retain psychological control, that even in absence, they'll still matter, that they'll still be in your head, influencing your choices. But when you vanish completely, without bitterness, without games, without even a trace, you challenge that belief. You confront them with the possibility that they never had the control they thought they did, that maybe they were just a moment in your story, not the center of it. And that realization, it's devastating to the ego, because people don't want to be forgotten. They don't want to be irrelevant. They want to be significant, even if they're no longer present. But your silence denies them that. It doesn't just say, "I'm moving on." It says, "I already have." And that statement, made without a single word, is louder than anything you could ever post, text, or say. Now, some will say silence is immature, that it's avoidance, that it's cold. But that's because they don't understand the power of restraint. Stoicism isn't about bottling your emotions. It's about mastering them. It's about choosing not to let someone else dictate your behavior. Silence is not avoidance. It's alignment. It's choosing your peace over petty explanations. It's choosing dignity over desperation. And yes, it's hard. At first, it feels like you're doing nothing, like you're missing an opportunity to be heard. But over time, you begin to see the strength in stillness. You realize that most closure is a myth, that the answers you're searching for won't come from them. They'll come from within, from your ability to detach, from your willingness to accept what is rather than chase what was. Think about this. What happens when you stop feeding the fire, when you stop checking their stories, when you stop reacting to their subtle provocations? They begin to feel the emptiness, not because you're trying to punish them, but because your absence speaks the truth they refuse to hear. You no longer need them. And people always feel the shift when they go from being chased to being ignored. It shakes the very foundation of the dynamic they were comfortable in. This is where your power lies, not in proving a point, but in embodying peace. You don't need her to see your progress. You don't need her to hear how strong you've become, because true strength doesn't announce itself. It just is. And when that strength is silent, it becomes unshakable. Over time, she will feel it, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the absence of your energy. She'll replay moments in her mind. She'll wonder if she made a mistake. She'll question why you haven't tried to come back. And the more she wonders, the more powerful you become. Not because you intended it, but because your silence left no room for assumption. It forced her to sit with her own choices, to feel what you once felt, to confront the void she created, and now has to live with. And what about you? What do you gain from this silence? Everything. You gain clarity. You gain peace. You gain your time, your focus, your energy. You begin to redirect your mind away from why didn't it work and toward what am I building now? You stop being a character in her story and return to being the author of your own. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's self-respect. That's freedom. You also learn something invaluable: how little you need to say to make a lasting impact. In a world addicted to overcommunication, silence becomes a statement. It tells people more about your mindset than any caption or speech ever could. It says, I've chosen me fully, finally, without regret. And once you've truly chosen yourself, nothing they say or do can shake that choice. In Stoic Relationships, this is the ultimate test. Can you let go without making noise? Can you walk away without needing to be seen doing it? Can you detach without declaring your detachment? If you can, you've mastered not just the art of letting go, but the deeper art of holding on to your power. Because here's the truth: the people who hurt you are not always villains. They're often just unaware of the damage they've done. But you are not unaware. You are awake. You've seen what attachment can cost. You felt the weight of chasing. And now you understand the beauty of being still, not frozen, not bitter, just still. And in that stillness, you're rebuilding, quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. That's the silent power move. It's not about hiding, it's about choosing not to perform. It's about stepping off the stage and walking into your next chapter, without needing an audience. And when you do that, when you move forward without saying a word, that's when the world takes notice, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer need it. 6. The final test: choosing yourself. She comes back. You knew it would happen eventually, maybe not how or when you expected, but it happened. A message out of nowhere, a memory she shares, a question she pretends is casual. She reaches out, not because she suddenly discovered something new, but because she felt something shift, your silence, your absence, your detachment, and now curiosity is eating at her. Doubt is whispering in her mind. She thought you would chase. You didn't. She thought she could leave and still matter. Now she's not so sure. That's what brought her back. But this part, this moment right here, is the real test. Because anyone can walk away. Anyone can go silent for a week or two. But the real question is this: when she comes back, do you let her in? That's the decision that defines whether this journey has transformed you or if it was just an emotional performance. That's what separates men who change for attention from men who change for themselves. And this choice, it's not about punishment. It's not about payback, it's about alignment, about understanding your worth, about seeing the full picture clearly, because you know exactly how it felt when she left. You remember what it did to your peace. You remember how it wrecked your sleep, stole your focus, broke your rhythm. And if you're honest, you also remember how easily she walked away, how little resistance she offered to losing you. That version of her doesn't get access to the version of you that exists now. Let's ask the hard question. Why is she coming back now? What changed? Has she truly grown? Has she taken responsibility for how she hurt you? Or is she just uncomfortable with losing control? Most people don't return out of love. They return out of doubt. Out of fear that they miscalculated, out of curiosity, out of regret. But not all regret is sincere. Some regret is rooted in ego, and if you let her back in too easily, all you do is validate her original decision. You prove that she could leave, hurt you, and still be welcomed back with open arms. And that erases all the growth you've done. Stoic relationships aren't built on nostalgia, they're built on values. And if someone walks away once without fighting for you, they've already shown you how little they respect what you offer. Why would you now allow them back into the kingdom you rebuilt from ruins? Think about what you've been through, the silence, the discipline, the self-work, the identity shift. Think about all the mornings you got up with no motivation and still chose to build. All the nights you sat in solitude instead of chasing comfort. That wasn't for her, that was for you. So if she returns and you're tempted to go back to how things were, pause, reflect. Ask yourself, is she reaching for me? Or just for the version of me she thought she could control? Is she truly interested in reconciliation? Or is this just her way of confirming she still matters? Don't fall for sweet words. Don't confuse softness for sincerity. Time reveals who's genuine, and people who changed don't need to announce it, they are it. She may say all the right things. She may look at you like she finally sees you. But the truth is, if she truly saw your worth, she never would have risked losing you in the first place. And now that she does see it, only after you became untouchable, you have to decide, do you go back to being reachable? Letting her back in is not a flex, it's not closure. It's a compromise, and unless she returns with humility, accountability, and consistent action, you're just repeating a cycle. Don't mistake attention for change. Don't let fear of loneliness cloud your progress. Because the deepest form of self-betrayal is returning to someone who abandoned you, hoping they'll treat you differently just because you treated yourself differently. And maybe you're still healing. Maybe a part of you wants to believe it. Can work now that you've grown. But growth doesn't mean revisiting the pain. Growth means you don't need that relationship anymore to feel complete. And from that place of strength, you see the truth. Some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to teach, to test, to reveal parts of yourself you forgot. But once the lesson is learned, you move forward, not backward. This is where stoicism is most needed. Because your emotions might want to say yes. They'll whisper that maybe this time it'll be different, But your wisdom, your inner stillness knows better. It sees the pattern. It remembers the past. It understands that discipline doesn't just show up when things are hard. It shows up when you're tempted to go easy on yourself. When you're tempted to break your own rules just because something familiar shows up in a new package. Remember who you were when she left, and remember who you are now. Are you really willing to risk that evolution just to satisfy an old emotion? You don't owe her access. You don't owe her comfort. You owe yourself consistency. If she had to lose you to appreciate you, let that loss be permanent. Not because you hate her, but because you finally loved yourself enough to close that door, not with bitterness, but with resolve. This is the part where most men fall. They do the work, they rebuild, they detach, but then she returns and they crumble. They go back to over-explaining, over-investing, overthinking, all to try and keep something they've already outgrown. Don't let that be you. Your progress wasn't for her. Your growth isn't conditional. You don't get stronger just to flex. You get stronger so you never fall again. So what's the final test? It's not surviving heartbreak. It's not disappearing into silence. It's not even leveling up in private. The final test is what you do when the past knocks again. Do you let it in, or do you hold the line? That line is your standard. That line is your new identity. That line says, the version of me you once knew no longer exists. And once you've said that with your actions, not your words, you become free. True freedom doesn't come from forgetting her. It comes from choosing you, fully, relentlessly, unapologetically. You don't prove your worth by getting her back. You prove it by not needing her return to validate your value. You prove it by recognizing that the man she walked away from no longer lives here. The man who lives here now is a man of vision, a man of purpose, a man who doesn't entertain confusion. So if this video reminded you of that, like it, comment number 1 below, and remind yourself and others, choosing yourself is the final form of strength. And if you're ready to keep walking the Stoic path, if you're committed to mastering your emotions, your identity, your future, subscribe now. This is more than just healing. This is becoming untouchable. And now here you are, at the end, but really at the beginning, because everything you've just heard, everything you've felt throughout this video wasn't about her. It never truly was. It's always been about you, your discipline, your growth, your ability to take pain and turn it into clarity, to take heartbreak and turn it into identity. They may have thought you would stay broken, that you'd stay waiting, hoping, obsessing, but they misunderstood your silence. They mistook it for weakness. They couldn't see that in that stillness, you were becoming something stronger than they ever imagined. A man who doesn't chase, who doesn't explain, who doesn't look back. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. It's about walking through fire and not just surviving, but reshaping yourself because of it. You've learned to respond with presence, not panic, with certainty, not need, with stillness, not reaction. That's what separates the few from the many. That's what creates a man no one can shake, because in the end, she was never the test. You were. Your ability to stay grounded when the ground disappears. Your ability to walk away not with noise, but with purpose. And now you've done that. Now you walk not to escape something behind you, but to pursue something ahead, something only you can build. A life that doesn't depend on who stays or who leaves, but on who you decide to become. You are no longer defined by who you lost. You are defined by how you responded when it hurt. That is the essence of Stoicism. That is the code of Stoic relationships. To choose yourself again and again without apology, without exception, because now you understand the most powerful truth of all. You are the prize. You are the power. You are the peace. And no one, not even the one who left, can take that from you ever again.